Alrighty. Just make sure that we are live and it's streaming and working properly, which it looks like it is. So I am doing a spontaneous live, but it is my hope to show up every Tuesday to do a paint with me session. And it'll kind of be a variety of topics. Today, as you can see, it's going to be these cute woodland creatures. I'm adding a few more. Today I might only get to maybe one animal. I am going to try and keep these to around 30 minutes. But I'm creating these watercolor woodland animals for our nursery. So I thought it'd be fun just to paint along with you guys. And I am so excited. I'm creating a nursery collection, my very first one. And I thought creating these animals, here's the little bear, into milestones and prints, all the fun things. I'm excited to see what I can create from these animals. So yeah, thanks so much for joining. Of course, the replay will be available. And I will go ahead and get started. Today, it's kind of a surprise, but I would love to create some birds to add in. And since, of course, right now I have a lot of ground animals, here I am with this beautiful owl as my reference. Hi, Cindy. Hi, Cindy from Central Pennsylvania. Getting colder. Oh, that's good that the blizzard missed you. It is freezing over here too, so I can relate. It's well, I think it's in the single digits now, but it was in the negatives when I had to go to the dentist this morning, so that's always lovely. But I am just grabbing a pencil here quick. I also have a few just smaller pointed round brushes since these animals are probably only about 3 or 4 inches by 4 inches, so they're not real big. Any watercolor palette that you have will be perfect for this, but I am using mine from Etcher. I really love it. It's just a nice travel set. Okay, so what I love to do first is always sketch out what I'm going to paint. So here I am. Most of the time I have things pre-sketched. I also plan to send out outlines and sketches. So I was going to say that come on back, I'll add in a link where you can sign up for my email list, and I will put you on there and you can get access to the sketches. So if you wanted to skip this step, you totally can. Alrighty, so just kind of doing a quick little outline. I'm also creating kind of an ABC poster. I won't do an animal for every single letter, but I definitely needed some birds. I have a list of animals. And depending on how fast this owl goes, we may get to another one, but they do take around 20 or so minutes, depending on the size too, of course. So something quick like that. Let's see if I can scoot in a little bit. Okay, I will likely do the stump. As you can see, my other creatures are sitting on grass. So it is kind of nice to have them grounded. I can always remove the stump or whatever it is when I get into Photoshop if I just really don't like the way it is, which is the beauty of digitizing artwork. Speaking of digitizing, I'm putting together a digitizing mini course to show how I digitize my watercolor artwork and put it onto products. So if that is something that interests you, I'll also leave a link once I'm done with the live. I'll leave a link in the description and you can go ahead and get on that email list. It is coming out very, very soon. I was working on it right before this class. All right, so now to outline where his little eyes are going to be. Don't really want to create a very scary owl. So let's see. That I think will work out okay. So it doesn't look like much, but once we add in the color, I think this owl will really come to life. Just enough to be able to see our sketch. I will say that I am not well experienced in painting birds. So this will be just fun to do something different. What I always like to do with my sketches is take my eraser and kind of run right over it and get rid of some of those really dark lines. Because once watercolor runs over pencil sketches, you can't erase it anymore. So just a quick tip, if you don't want to see your pencil lines or you know your paint won't get as dark as your pencil lines, just quick run right over that. All right. I'll drop the reference photo, or I'll try to keep it. I don't know if, for how small I'm painting, I might have to just keep it to the side, but I'll drop it in afterwards. Let's see here. Always tricky to try and capture everything in the screen. All right, be sure to have a paper towel and your water jar, and I am ready to get started painting. All right, just wetting my brush, and I'll be using a lot of browns. So somewhere in this range, just getting my palette wet, some warm browns. And then I even have been using black, which is very unlike me when it comes to painting animals and portraits, but it just seems to be the right vibe for this quicker illustration style. The yellow ochre. I have kind of a messy spot on my palette right here, which would be really pretty for the gold feathers. So just making sure that I have everything kind of wet and activated here. This paper's so big, let's see if I can do that. There. Okay. Let's start with the ears, just so I don't have to run into them as often. A little bit of black, but otherwise mostly kind of like a brown umber-y color, something that's a darker brownish color. And using the very tip of my brush, I'll just start to outline just the edges of the ear feathers. Then I'll get rid of the paint on my brush. So I don't have a ton of water, but just enough to be able to smooth some of those edges down into the top of the ears there. And there are some undertones to these feathers before I go back through and define all of those details. And I see that as being that gold color that I mixed up right here. So just using mostly water, a little bit of that paint. I'm going to use that to help define, just with a nice smooth stroke. some of these areas here. And I might even just do them as kind of longer little strokes. Again, I'll show some detail once I get my base layers in. Add some more up here. I want to keep them pretty light. Just grab more water and smooth that out. Kind of bring them up around the head here. Okay. So something simple like that, just for that first layer. Looks like I would like to add a little bit more down around the legs, so I just picked up a little bit more. Just adding it right in there. And on his belly. Alrighty. So again, when I work so small like this, you don't have to get super detailed. Just add a little bit there. Hello, hello from Virginia. Got a lot of the East Coast. Okay. So we are going to work on defining those shadows. There's the big shadow here, right underneath where that big wing of his is, as well as the breast of the belly here. So let's go ahead and grab that same mixture that I had mixed up with the black and the darker brown. It's kind of like a grayish brown. I'm going to run it right along the edge. Might even find that it's going to blend into that first layer that I painted of the yellow, which is totally fine, because I'm actually going to go back through and smooth it. So something like that. And now with very little on my brush, I'll just continue to smooth that into the body. And then we can define that feather as it works its way down into the tail. So right now I'm just laying in those base shadows. Right here could get way darker. So I'll pick up more of that darker pink color. And while it's wet, just run it right along there. And then there's another dark shadow line here, right to the end of that tail. Okay. Might as well continue on with that same dark color that I had. So the brown and a little bit of the black is going to create the little tail and toenails that this bird has. So continuing still with this, I'm using a size 6 pointed round brush, but always be aware that different brands have, the sizes are not all made equal. So size 6 for this brush is not necessarily going to be the same for Winsor & Newton brush. And that goes for paints too, which can be a little bit frustrating, but understandable. So I just did 3 little lines there since they are so small. There is a little toenail talon, which definitely has a technical term, but the back one. Just continue to add the shadow right above the foot. But for now, I am going to switch because I want to do the eyes. I think that's just going to help bring it together, and then we can finish up with the feather details. I have a 000, which is like about as tiny as it gets, fine liner brush. All right, so let me see if I can move this here. So those eyes are those beautiful gold colors. So yellow ochre for sure. And then mixes I see of even some oranges. I'm not super well versed in this brand's palette, but I'm just gonna pull some in my mixing well over here. And I also see some of these warm burnt sienna colors too. And maybe some of the darker browns, but I'll just do that for now. All right. So I don't want too much water on my brush. I want to control where that paint is going to go, but I want quite a bit of paint. It's a very bright eye. Alrighty. Very small area I'm working in, so I might not get much detail. My illustrations for these are not going to be blown up real big, so that's why I'm okay with painting them so small. But let's say I wanted to have more detail in my painting, or I wanted to blow it up bigger. You'll definitely want to paint it larger than just this little 3 or 4 inch painting. Looks quite scary. Okay. So I can't paint the dark eyeliner like on the eyes until that yellow is fully dried. In the meantime, we could paint the beak, which is a very light gray color. So I'm just grabbing a little bit of black and going to use this fine liner brush again to help outline where that nose is, or the beak. And then I'll get rid of the paint on my brush and just pull some of that color back up and up the bridge of the nose. And again, to create more of a gray, I always love using the Payne's gray. And you could mix that with your black. This color I'll use to create these little mouth pieces here. All right, I'm going to switch to my other brush, picking up a little bit of the browns and the grays. Very little bit on my brush. Dab it on your paper towel if you need. I just want to help smooth that little piece that I just painted out. Cannot wait to finish those eyes because it looks so scary right now. Just using excess paint to define the outer edge. And you can just take more water and smooth it out if you ever just don't like strokes. Okay, let's see. Mine are dry enough to finish the eyes. So I'm switching back to my pointed round brush. Not much water, mostly black paint. Let's paint in those eye details. I always like to outline the outer edge of the eye. And I can't get too detailed, it's too small, so I'm just making sure to not press too hard. And not to lose the yellow. I'm going to let that dry before I try and work it again. At this point, let's add in feathers that we see here. And you could do that with your tiny little liner brush, or for me, I'll just hop back to my pointed round brush with the nice tip to it. This is where we'll pick up varying degrees of browns to blacks. But this will help our little owl come to life here for sure. So he's got some stuff, little feather textures up top here, kind of one that kind of comes off of his eye. And definitely some around his ears. So we'll just start to do kind of a stippling effect. Like that. We're going to use dark paint to help define the outer side of his head. And then we'll start to work our way down. Just going to work with the color I have on this brush until it just starts to fade away. Just doing a lot of little lines. So we just want to show feathery textures. We don't need to draw or paint every single feather. So again, I'll pick up some Payne's Gray, some browns. Now that I have more on my brush, I can kind of make it look darker on the left side where the shadows are casting. Do some over here. I plan to take my brush at the end and kind of smooth out some of these areas. So I just want to make sure that I'm painting in the direction that those feathers actually are going. I see some feathers that are just kind of jutting out on the side here. And I'm just going to make this part darker while I have this paint on my brush, so layering another layer. So again, I don't want to get too heavy in certain areas, but just doing some bigger stippling by pressing harder down here since it looks darker. I don't have much water on my brush as it's starting to fade away, so it's giving me a nice dry brush effect that I can layer over, which I really like. So that's all I'm doing right now, is using whatever is left on my brush is giving me that nice fun texture because I'm using a 140-pound cold press paper. The cold press is what's allowing that paintbrush to create that texture. So I'll just continue. And looks like I lost out on all that water, so now just pick up some more. Looks like I could add some up here around the neck. But whenever you pick up more paint, you want to make sure that you go back to the areas that have the detail, really distinct detail. So that could be a shadowed area like this left side, or that could be those really defined feathers up top here. So I've been working in the same color of that darkish black brown. I want to add in some warmer browns. So just take a good traditional brown. I don't want much, but just enough to kind of show some lines. You can kind of see the lines within the feathers here. So again, just creating that little texture. I love that these can be quick little studies. They don't have to be 5x7 or 8x10, which can take much longer. Something like that. You could even take some of the yellows that we were mixing up earlier and add those in to areas in between to help warm that up. I think I'll add some warmth with that same yellow right up top here in the neck. So I love the way that that layers right over the textures we were already creating. I think there's some warmth down here. The feet are pretty white, but just a little bit of warm there. And right there in the shadow area. It's always good to take a step back. You don't want to lose perspective. I think the nose needs to come down a little bit farther on mine. So I will switch back to my tiny little liner brush. And I'm going to paint that just a little bit longer. Add a little depth around those eyes. Can add a little bit of detail again with that same color. And some feathers right below here. All right, so even my eyes look like they got a little bit close together, but I think for these lighthearted illustrations, it'll be perfect for what I want. I'm going to switch to the bleed-proof white, and that is going to allow me to paint in a few feathers like this. So if you don't know, the Dr. PH Martin's Bleed-Proof White is the color that I love to use for adding on the last little textures here. So we can add them down into the feathers. If you get too dark in areas, that's always a great way to brighten it back up again. Let's see, we can even highlight the top of the foot. There are these tiny little feathers that kind of come over into the bridge of the nose. I'm not sure if I'll be able to capture for how small this illustration is, but I might just add a little bit. So that white really helps to clean up areas too. So if your eye seems just too messy, you can use that. I'm gonna add some more right around the face here. I want to keep it nice and bright. Okay, let's see here. See a nice white bright patch here that I kind of overpainted, so I'll just add in a little bit more of the white again. Okay. It's always important that if you have this paint, it dries up really fast, so and it does re-wet, but not the best. So make sure you put the top back on. Okay, so that little stump he's sitting on. Very similar color scheme to where we were working within the body. I think I'll just add a little bit of brighter browns, so like the burnt sienna color and the yellow ochre. So I'll just want to make sure that he looks grounded. So I'll paint around those little talons. While it's still wet, I'll pick up that nice dark, rich brown color, and I'm just going to run that right underneath here. And a few strokes on the inside so it's not one flat little rich color there. And I'm not even really sure what this stump is that he's sitting on, so I'll just continue kind of using the grayish brown colors. Just to kind of give the illusion that it's a piece of wood that he's sitting on. Wood textures would be a fun one to do for a future paint with me, just to kind of play around with how to capture a realistic piece of wood. I haven't done that very much. I'm leaving highlights here. Just kind of work that piece down. While this is still wet, let's pick up some of that Payne's gray. That's one of my favorite colors to drop in to create a more natural looking brown. So we'll just drop that in there. Kind of define some of the edges over here. That dry brush effect would be really a great approach for wood. So I have a little more paint on my brush than I can do with the dry brush effect, but you could take your brush and really get rid of it on a scrap piece of paper, and then you can bring in that dry brush effect. Okay, so I think he's turning out very nice. So I think what I'll do is just take a step back from him over the next day or so. I won't scan him in quite yet, just so I can see where needs some darker shadows. So probably around in this area. It's always good to do with every painting you do anyways, is to take a step back and see what needs a little bit of darkening, because even that layer helps to give more dimension like I did within these other animals here. And maybe there's a little bit more we could do within those ears to kind of have them shooting down. And kind of defining the top of the head there. But there's really only so much you can do with such a small painting, so I think I'll stop there. Let's see. Of course, I'm the queen of overworking things, so I'll just add a little more to the nose. And then kind of define that out. But okay, so there is my owl, and I just love the way that these animals are coming together. So you can see that they're pretty loose. They're enough to show a more realistic style because the colors are fairly accurate to the actual animal. So, but otherwise, they are kind of a looser style than I'm used to painting anyways, but I just think it's fun to see them. Once they're scanned in, I can do so many fun things with them. I'm obviously have an example milestone card here. I'm also creating a few prints from these animals, so excited to see how they come to life when I digitize them. So again, I will include the link to the reference in the description once we are off the live, so you can access that. And I'll also include a link to sign up for my email list where I will announce the live paint with me as well as other YouTube tutorials that I will release in the coming weeks. Outlines will be provided every once in a while. So otherwise, hope you had a enjoyable afternoon with me, painting with me, and I would love to see your paintings. If you do paint them, you can send me a message or post them on Instagram. I do check that the most at Windswept Design Studio. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all next week.